You feel like a creator, you feel like a small deity. That object has inherent meaning and value. It's not just, off the shelf. My name is Mengchao Wu, and I'm the owner of Wu Ceramics. When I first came into clay, I thought that I was not artistic. I didn't think I was creative, and when I started making things, I realized that you can learn creativity, you can build skills. In my studio, I teach people that, are maybe a little bit apprehensive about their own creativity. Maybe they're like, oh, I'm not that artistic and this is just like, something to try out. And I see them touching the clay. I see that anxiety, that apprehension, and I see it transform into something that they are so immersed in. They're just like, I did that. And they can't believe that they did that. And that gives me the high. Like I am so satisfied when they have a good experience. I love working with clay because of a lot of reasons. First, have you ever touched clay? It's amazing. It just is so extremely tactile and malleable. I did grow up with a lot of ceramics, actually. We use a lot of ceramic bowls in my household. And so in some part, I think it was a little bit of a cultural aspect. In some part, it was I just really enjoyed creating. You have a ball of clay, you make something, boom, 2 weeks later, you get it back. And that kind of iterative feedback was just very enticing and addictive. It's just great. It just feels so good when it like slips through your fingers and when you're like making a shape. I gotta stop fucking with it. Want me to squish it?
No, don't squish it.
I'm gonna.
If you want, yeah, go ahead. All that work, yeah.
Yeah, but practice, right?
Yeah, that's
is
true.
Important. I do a lot of pre-prep setup work. The making process maybe takes like an hour. The setup process takes like 3. So I always measure my clay. I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I weigh out every single ball of clay. I make sure that they're all the same consistency. I wedge everything. I have a concept. If I use, 2 kilograms of clay, maybe I can get there. And if it doesn't, then I have to adjust, right? So in that sense, it is trial and error, but based off of some now understanding of my material.
So I threw this base yesterday, and at this point, it's just a little bit hard. And then I usually take this thing. I tend to go for something a little bit more natural, so like mountain paths. The first cut is the deepest. Just like every little crevice here, I wax. So that takes a long time because the wax prevents the glaze from getting onto the clay. And that's why you can see the differentiation, right, between the clean parts and the glazed parts. But I used to do all this with just like a knife. It was a pain. Thank goodness for this tool. I think of them as little things that like interact with each other in a way. Like little stories that happen. Like, why are they coming together? Who knows?
These days, a lot of my work has to do with experiences I've had growing up. One of the key themes that I'm working with is connection. And what I mean is like connection between people, and how do we, in this somewhat divisive society, how do we connect better? One of the inspirations that I have is a saying that my mom always told me, and it is in Chinese, it's an idiom. It said, 藕断丝连. And what it means is when the lotus root is broken, the silk strands still connect us. So if you actually take like a vegetable, the lotus root, and you actually break it, there's actually these like strands that you can see when you pull the two pieces apart. Now that I am far from my mom and my relatives, there's still that level of connection, and I think we can all relate to that. A piece that I'm most proud of is I made it in my ceramics residency last year in Valoris, France. And it's called Mother and Child. And they're biomorphic lotus shapes. Surprise! And the mother is this like tallish piece, and the child kind of nestles into that lotus cavern of that belly. They're connected by canthal wire, which is a high fire temperature wire. The saying 藕断丝连 is all about my mother. It's all about like how I miss her and how I only see her a couple times a year because she lives in Houston, I live here, and she hates the winter, so she never comes to Canada. So, and how even though we're far apart, we can still, we still keep in touch. We're still family, right? And same with like my extended family in China, right? Like that's still family. Getting all emotional here. And in my residency, I focused on sculptural work because mostly what I do in my actual practice is wheel work, and I don't have as much experience with sculpture making. And so I took a sculpture class in Paris, and then I went to my residency for a month. And I met these artists from all over the world, and the 6 of us just created work in this studio, and we like spent countless hours together, just like, playing with clay and then giving each other critique and support. And like when my piece failed, Kyungmin was like, oh, do it differently this other time, right? It was fantastic being the person with the least amount of experience in the room, because I could be like, wow, look at the level of just like amazing, and just feel really inspired. All right. Starting the Wu ceramics business was definitely not easy. And to get over that, like, do I do this? I think I had a little bit of help. And that little bit of help was because I had already one failed startup. And I had been working on the startup for 2 years. I had made no money. So I was like, you know what? At least if I make ceramics, I can probably sell a couple pieces. A hard part for me is thinking of it as work and treating it as work. You think you're making pots, but what you're really doing is marketing. And what you're really doing is packing for like a show. And what you're really doing is like trying to see like how can I get people to like come and see my work in person, right? And the making of the pots and the artistic aspect of it is maybe 10%. I actually have a pottery mentor. His name is Jason Labay, and he describes himself as a dinosaur. He's only in his 70s, and I'm his karate kid. So I, dump his buckets of water. I clean his studio space, and he allows me to work in there, and he gives me a lot of like life knowledge, but also like ceramic knowledge. Oh, your hand positioning here is wrong. And when he says, that looks nice, I'm just like, oh, Jason said that something looked nice. Wow. Know that your relationship with your art might change if it also becomes your work. Make sure that you can still pay your bills, right? Because the life of a starving artist is not a good life. Get to know the people in the community. That's been immensely helpful for me. Having this space and having the resources to do that, and having a community of other ceramic artists in the area, that's what you really need. There's a wealth of people who are there to share their expertise, who are so generous with their time, who are generous with their connections. I used to have a career in finance and tech. So like, that's different than someone who's 25 and has never worked before, right? It's a different kind of lifestyle. And I think that's really difficult for someone who's starting out and who's young and who's like, how can I make the ends meet? Yeah. My students, I think they really enjoy it. And what I really want is for them to not just enjoy the session, but then have a deeper appreciation of the craft and the artistry that goes into making that object. I love my space here, and I know that there is enough demand in KW. I can see that there is room for many, many studios in Kitchener to have that third space where people can like meet people, have a creative passion, and like maybe start a side hustle. I want to create that. Still trying to figure out what my artistic career is, right? I'm still kind of early on that. Who knows where I'll be in 2 years, 3 years? Who knows where I'll be in like 10 months, you know? Yeah. Suddenly mud has become a cat, right? So it's just, it's really fun.